The following announcement has been paid for by Perched on the Top Rope.
Hey, this is David Penzer, and you're watching Perched on the Top Rope.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Perched on the Top Rope. I am your host, Lee Walker III, and as you heard from that show opener today, we have former WCW ring announcer and TNA ring announcer, David Penzer. David, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you, man? Thanks for having me.
Oh, I am doing fantastic. I gotta tell you, I read your book, Sitting Ringside Volume 1, in a day.
Wow.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's 294 pages. You can buy it on Amazon. You can also go to guyevansbooks.com. David, I absolutely loved the book. I know you know the expression, you learn something new every day. And I learned a lot in a day from that book, not just about you, but about WCW as a whole. There was a lot of things in there that I personally did not know. And from WCW, but also about you. And one of those things, which is also really big to me, is mental health.
Yeah.
I am absolutely, I love when those open up about mental health, because even to this day, there's still a little stigma to it, even though it's in a lot better position. Talking about mental health issues and things like that, it's in a lot better position than it was in the early 90s, the 80s, the 70s, so on and so forth. And it's something that you talked a lot about in your book with your own personal experiences, and your dad being a psychologist. Back then, I would say, even like for psychology and psychologists, having, being part of a practice and things like that, there were stigmas to it, like negatively looked at, I guess, like if you went to seek help for mental health. Man, I gotta ask, how did you handle that in the business?
Looking back, it's pretty crazy, as I talk about it extensively in the book, as you mentioned. Thank you for the kind words. It was important to me that this be part of the book. I pretty much let Guy Evans guide the ship, but because I had never obviously done a book before, and didn't know Beck, but I wanted that to be included. I'm pretty it's something special to me and important to me, because I know how bad it is when you have a bad anxiety or panic attacks, or both at the same time, quite frank. And I know how, you feel like it's never going to get better. And you see, God bless Daffney. I was trying to call her that night, begging her, and I guess she was already gone. But, in that moment, she thought she was never going to feel good again. And I've been there. Thinking it's never, and after a while, it became like a running joke between me and my dad. After like the 30th year, Dad, hey, I'm just want to give you a call. I'm having another little bit of anxiety and panic attacks, and this one, it's worse than it normally is, because normally I feel something every day, but I just push past it. But sometimes, when, like they say, when the dam breaks, which is your mind, and everything comes spilling out, it's tougher than others. And it used to be a running joke after about 30 years of this, that I feel like it's never going to, I would say at that point, I know it's going to go away, because we've been playing this game for 30 years, but it still feels like it's never going to go away. It's really one of the more helpless feelings that one could feel. And my only message to everybody is, who might be going through that now or in the future, is reach out to somebody. It's going to go away. I know that there are many people out there who think it never will. I would have bet my anything I had that I was never going to feel right again. But you do. It takes a while, and you got to pretend a lot, and make yourself go through motions of stuff that you're not feeling. you're not feeling it, but it will go away. And so reach out to somebody, whether it's a friend, a family, a counselor, a 1-800 number. Hit me up on Twitter, or on at David Penzer, or Facebook. I'm happy to help to chime in as well. Just it's just important, because I've been there, and we lose so many people because they feel helpless and lost, and they feel like it's going to be like that forever. And especially today with all the medications that are out there, and if you find that when they find the right tail for you, it really could help a lot. I've been on the same medications for 35 years now, and don't overtake it, don't undertake it, just take it every day. And sometimes it helps, sometimes it doesn't help as much. But I can tell you from 40 years ago, when they started me on medications, they didn't do anything. They made you constipated, is all they did. But if I'm being honest. But so yeah, it's important to me, and I'm glad that you brought that up. I think my story is kind of cool. I think that the ride is pretty cool. I think, being there as a sitting ringside, so to speak, going from 800 fans to 40,000 fans to 800 fans again, is pretty cool in my perspective on it from ringside. But if anybody gets anything out of this book, it's like, just reach out, and somebody will be there to help you, and it will get better.
Yeah, I've been on the same medication for 10 years, and I can tell, like, if I miss a day, which has happened, or for whatever reason I took the medication, but I'm just maybe not feeling it that day. So fans, if you have these issues, reach out to somebody. I go to therapy. I actually go every Thursday. And it's great. I'm going after this, actually. So I find it to be, one of the easier things to do is to talk to somebody. And you mentioned that you had your dad because he was a psychologist. And early in the book, you talked how your dad would take you to shows, but maybe wrestling wasn't all that interesting to him because you would catch him reading or things like that. And then you also talked later on, you and your dad actually went to WrestleMania together. How was your dad at WrestleMania now that you were older than compared to like when you were a kid going to shows?
Same. He brought Time magazine and Psychology Today, and he read it during the shows. And he liked to write a lot. He had wrote several books on several subjects, and would write articles frequently. And so he would bring a pad if he was done his magazines, and he'd write in the chaos of WrestleMania. We went to both of the ones at in Atlantic City, 4 and 5, and I was supposed to go to 3 actually with a friend of mine. I had tickets. I had a air flight, and I had a hotel room, and anxiety kept me from going. And I look back on that, man, how cool would it have been to be there when Hogan pinned Andre, slammed him and pinned him. I watched it on pay-per-view from a friend's home because my parents didn't have pay-per-view, but man, it was so cool. And I could have been there, but I was paralyzed in that moment before. And the funny thing about anxiety, and I don't want to spend the whole thing on anxiety because I know people turn into this podcast, it's not perched on the top anxiety, it's perched on the top rope. But the thing about it is, when I was watching WrestleMania 3, I felt so much better. Anxiety wants to get you to interrupt your life and not do things, whether it's wrestle a match, whether it's go to on a date, whether it's and if you cancel, you automatically you feel better, like almost instantaneously. And I let it get the best of me that one time. That's the only time I let it get the best of me. But yeah, how cool would that have been? But yeah, my dad was very supportive. Had no interest in wrestling. And he, later on, he got to, book, he got to hang out with a bunch of the guys in Vegas on an off day, and we all got hammered. He had a good time. Flair was holding court. the pool bar at the MGM with everybody. And so he got to experience cool things, but like watching the matches, that just wasn't his cup of tea. Quite frankly, to be honest, that's my least favorite part about professional wrestling. I like watching matches, but to me, and it talks about it in the book, the angles and the promos have always, since I was 11 years old, and Dusty Rhodes and Superstar Billy Graham at Championship Wrestling from Florida has always been what's fascinated me. The matches just facilitate the next part of the story, or the ending of the story.
And I'm so glad you brought up the promo side and everything, because when it comes to those things, especially with Dusty, one of your favorite promos of Dusty is often one not talked about. Everyone infamously knows the son of a plumber, but you went with, while in WCW, him wanting to team with Dustin, his son at the time. And you have that promo in there. And when you read it, this is what I loved about the book. When you read some of these like promos that are in the book, you wanted after to go watch the promo. And as a fan, who grew up through WCW, WWF in the golden era, and then the Attitude and the Monday Night Wars and all of that, this book really let you relive all of those moments through that time. And like I said, I absolutely loved it. And that promo that you had chosen, that's one of your favorites, now one of mine, after I read it and then went and watched it. And it's just so much passion.
It was real.
Yeah.
It was real. There was friction there. Maybe played up is a little bit more real than it really was. It was played up like it was impromptu. Obviously, Dustin knew what the promos would be about, but in their hearts of hearts and in the psyche and in their minds of all the things they have gone through as father and son, and the letdowns that Dustin had, and because Dusty was on the road all the time and stuff like that. That was real. That was a real emotion playing out. Almost, I would say, almost like therapy going on in front of 5,000 fans in Macon, Georgia, and millions watching around the world. So that's why I like it. I like organic things in professional. The best stuff in professional wrestling is organic stuff, the stuff you don't plan. The Rusev Day, that's just one example, but that just goes get the fans take either get behind it, or they start pointing it out or create it or chant it or whatever. But the organic stuff to me is the favorite stuff, is because it's real. And those are fans saying to you, I don't care what Vince thinks, and I don't care what Tony thinks, and I don't care. This is what we think, and we want to get involved. So I really like that. And by the way, as far as the book, shout out to Guy Evans, man. I couldn't have done any of this with Evans. All I did is tell my story and my opinions on people and my remembrances of that wild ride that was WCW and the Monday Night Wars. But he was the one who made the story come to life in such a wonderful way. So I would be totally remiss if I didn't, say thank you and point a spotlight on him. He's a fantastic person and a great writer. And I wouldn't have done this with anybody else. And I'm glad I didn't. By the way, did you get to the formats yet, or did you have to go back and look at those?
I have to go back and look at those.
You peaked at the last Nitro. Come on, tell me.
The last Nitro, I was how old, 2001. I was 16 when that happened, and that was for me. That night I actually did not flip back and forth between WCW and Raw. I actually kept it on WCW and taped Raw. And I'm going to go a step further. When the Monday Night Wars were going on, I like to tell people this because it makes people laugh. I would have WCW on with the cruiserweights, anything NWO related, and then I would, turn to WWF with Raw. But if I knew the NWO were going to be on, I turned it back. If I knew cruiserweights were on, I turned it back. But also, if Disco Inferno was on,
Oh,
I
geez,
turned
don't
it to
say it.
I would turn it to WCW.
The funny part about flipping back and forth is, at one point there was like 7.5 people supposedly watching us, and 7.5 million people watching WWE Raw. And Jimmy Hart used to say all the time, "There's no way that 15 million people are watching the shows. It's just they're going back and forth." And he might have been right, but he was sure of it. He's like, they're just flipping back and forth and counting for both shows, but it didn't matter. It still made for a great competitive, you know, situation where everybody had to be on top of their game, or else it was not a good week.
Oh yeah, it really did. And
And I mean, they lived and died on the ratings. I mean, when the ratings came out, I can't express enough how important that was. People now talk about AEW, what they get, the ratings that WWE programming has been getting leading up to Mania, and then coming down a little bit, which is normal. The Rock is going to bring people to watch the show, whether he's a heel or a babyface. And so we lived and died by the ratings. So nobody even cared that we sold the place out like 3 weeks before, 20,000 seats 3 weeks before the show, which, was normally what you are looking at is in the wrestling business is the gates. How many people did we draw? How much money did we make? It turned around from that, obviously, because they started, doing main events and stuff instead of squash matches, because it didn't matter how many people were in the building. It just mattered how many people were watching. It totally changed the entire wrestling business on its face in so many different ways. And, so it's interesting, looking back to be able to watch that in real time, going from having squash matches and maybe like Bobby Eaton versus Arn Anderson as the main event to, Hulk Hogan versus Goldberg is the main event, and no squash matches for the most part, unless you wrestled Goldberg in his early days when he first went on the streak. So it's I didn't even put that in the book. I didn't even think about it, but you made me think of it. It's just really amazing how it totally changed. The metric went from money to ratings.
yeah, it really did. And that became it was a driving force for the Monday Night Wars. And David, when I said in the beginning, you learn something new every day. And when I read this book, I learned a lot from sitting ringside volume 1. For instance, throughout your career while in WCW, your mentors had played a real vital role for you, from Bob Roop, Jody Hamilton, and Tony Schiavone, just to name 3 that you had brought up in the book. All played a detrimental role in your career in helping you. And one of those was one of the bigger things I learned was being a road agent under Jody, traveling through Florida and Georgia, grabbing talents to bring them to the Saturday night shows to wrestle, and then bringing them back. There was a lot of aspects to your career that I personally did not know about. I just knew that David Penzer was a ring announcer. I didn't know about that side of David Penzer in WCW.
Yeah, it was pretty insane. I look back and I was like, I don't know how I did that, man. You know, I'd go across the state of Florida one way and then go up the West Coast and then go across the state of Florida back to Orlando and go up 75. And then at the first year or so, it was just Mondays. So then we would no sleep. We would take turns driving, and we turn around and come right back. I don't know how we did that, because that was like 15 hours each way, with matches and catering and matches in between. But we took turns driving. But yeah, I like to say my story that isn't improbable and almost impossible. So many, as you read, so many things had to go right that should have gone wrong. It was a different business back then. They didn't let people in 1990 in the back of WCW tapings that don't have a link to the business or aren't wrestlers or referees. I like to say that Jody Hamilton saw something in me that wasn't there. But whatever he saw, thank God, and I've told him so many times how much I appreciate it. He opened the door for me to get to, really live my dream. Before that, I was living it on the indies, and I still in the business and learning under Bob Roop and stuff. But this is living my dream. I'm hanging out with the Rock and Roll Express and Arn Anderson and the Junkyard Dog and Tommy Rich and all these guys that I grew up watching. And all of a sudden, they got a nickname for me. You saw in the book, Junkyard Dog named me Walking Man, and people still call me Walking Man to this day. That were there back then, because all I was doing is walking them around, getting things signed for the office, running talent for the interviews. It was I never sat down. That's kind of strange, because I got to sit down for 15 hours each way in the van. But yeah, I look back and that's insanity. But I did it, and nothing was going to stop me. I didn't put this in the book, but we once rolled a van and got a new one and made the town.
Wow.
Yep.
Wow. And everyone was
rolled the van, got in a police car, went to the nearest Hertz, I think it was, and got another van.
Oh, wow.
And so it's pretty. Everybody's a little banged up, but nobody's too bad. And we all decided we're gonna make the town. And people, guys, wrestlers, get involved in, it's very easy to get involved in yourself and your place on the card and who am I winning or losing tonight? Especially because it was just changing to where you got paid on where you were on the card, not on guaranteed money. So, but they'd hear something like that and they'd be like, "Do you hear Walking Man rolled a van and got another one and made the town?" That's pretty impressive, So that's how you little by little gain people's respect. And that's also why I don't have pictures with anybody from the old days. The one thing that I beat myself up on every time is there's a really cool picture from a Nitro anniversary that we had at Center Stage that Gary Cappetta has with Bruno Sammartino and Andre the Giant. Andre was in the Princess Bride fit, which is one of my favorite movies of all time. And I didn't get a picture. I was right there on the other side of Andre the Giant. If you would have gone like 5 feet to the left, you would have seen me. I was there, but I was just too embarrassed. I didn't want people to think I was a mark. And, now I try to get pictures as much as I can, but most of my pictures in the book are with celebrities, because I used to go to the WCW used to send me, well, they didn't send me, I asked to go because I was a mark for me, all the celebrities and stuff. But what's called the NAPTI convention, which was a syndicated television convention. So every show was syndicated. There was no, everything was syndicated back then. So basically, for people who don't know what syndicated means, it's not on the same time all over the country. Sometimes even to this day, sometimes Wheel of Fortune is on at 7 and Jeopardy's on at 7:30. Sometimes it's flip-flop. So every station, has to purchase. Now I know we're in the Netflix world and all that, and we're getting away from that. But so everybody who had a potential pilot, from Judge Judy to I remember meeting Kiss there once in their makeup, because they were doing a Kiss cartoon for syndication for Saturday mornings. I still have those pictures. I think they're in the book. And everybody. I met Alex Trebek and have a picture with Alex Trebek and the host of Wheel of Fortune, Pat Sajak and Vanna White. I have a picture of me with Donnie and Marie, which for some odd reason, even though I wasn't really a Donnie and Marie fan, is one of my favorite pictures I have. So, but yeah, those you just didn't take pictures with the boys at the time. You were stereotyped, and you had to know how to act. And thankfully, I got Bob Roop smartened me up, and then Jody smartened me up. Randy Anderson took me under his wing and smartened me up, and I had people that, that really helped me, and quite frankly, I didn't deserve it, but for whatever reason, I don't mean to keep talking like on and on, but I was so lucky to live my dream, man. And I'm still doing it. So it's just, I've been talking about it a lot lately for obvious reasons. And, it still gives me goosebumps. I don't take any of it for granted.
No, I absolutely love it. And in the book also, you had brought him up, Gary Michael Cappetta. I've had him on the show. Phenomenal guy. What was it like to be able to work under Gary?
Well, there would be no David Penzer ring announcer without Gary Michael Cappetta. And the reason why, I don't even think at the beginning he knew that I wanted to be a ring announcer. I stayed really low on that. I think the only one I told was Jim Ross. Jim Ross was sort of in an executive producer position. And then when he left right before he left, Tony Schiavone had come back from WWF in the same position. So those are the only people I ever mentioned that to. And of course, Jody Hamilton knew, if he ever heard that they needed one, but I didn't go around talking about it. So, but one of the things was, for the longest time, one of my jobs was to ring the bell by the hard camera. And I got to be on the headset and listen to how the production went and how they cued Gary, listen to Gary on how he worked the crowd. And, it's very important, especially televised shows, to be able to get the crowd in the right mood, to be able to get them to know what they're going to see, especially a 3-hour live show with commercials. Is it's very easy to get, to get out of it, as you get into it when the show starts, and then 2 hours in you're like looking at your watch. But my job was to make sure they weren't looking at their watch. They were excited to see what was coming next and after that. And I learned so much from Gary just sitting there ringing the bell. As I got the backup job and then things got closer to him leaving, which I never in a million years thought he would, I used to tell him, "You're not going anywhere." And he would say, "David, I'm leaving next month." And I'd be like, "No, they're going to re-sign you at the last minute." He goes, "I don't want to re-sign." It's like, whatever. But yeah, he taught me a lot then. But just watching him perform and listening to the production in my ear and how the whole how it was all done gave me such an advantage that anybody else that wouldn't have sat there in that position with a headset on would never have known. And I like to say I won by default, but that gave me a huge upper hand.
Yeah, it was the book's incredible with you in talking about Gary. And one of the things that I absolutely loved and love about you is you're a wrestling fan. And you talk about wrestling. Yes, and in throughout the book you talk about that. And for me as a fan, that made the book more exciting to read, because there's some autobiographies out there that you read, and while they're reliving the memories and stuff like that in later interviews, so to speak, maybe some wrestlers speak negatively about their experience and this and that, and then you get a different perspective from the book. This I love because you openly say right in the beginning, "I'm a fan. I'm a wrestling fan." And it's spoken throughout the whole book, and I absolutely loved that as I was reading it.
Yeah, I'm enamored by it. I still am. I turned on Championship Wrestling from Florida in May of 1977, and I got mesmerized, and I'm still as mesmerized today. It's hard to watch all the TV, so most of the time I VR and fast forward. But the Bloodline stuff. I haven't watched Bryan Danielson versus Will Ospreay yet, but I'm looking forward to that. I love the Bloodline stuff. I got into it organically, and I like to say organically is how I like things to happen in wrestling. But if you remember, there was one where Jey Uso couldn't stop laughing, and he was making everybody else laugh, and it went viral, and I watched it. And so I was like, well, let's see how this goes next time. So I DVR'd SmackDown. I wasn't DVRing SmackDown at the time. I wasn't really into WWE at all, quite frankly. And, I would just kind of read the results online or something, but I really didn't watch it. And and it got me hooked. And to this day, yes, I was on with Bill Apter and Dr. Sean from Sportskeeda a couple nights ago, and he said book the main event, the city and the bill that you want to main event. You want to do the main event of WrestleMania. And I said, okay, Madison Square Garden. Oh, he said any pay-per-view. I said Madison Square Garden because I never did Madison Square Garden. I said WrestleMania because I never did WrestleMania. And I said Solo Sikoa, Tama Tonga, and Jacob Fatu against Roman and the Usos. That's how into the storyline I still am, man. What a great storyline. NWO was groundbreaking and stuff, but this one has gone on for, this storyline has drawn money and ratings for 4 years. That's almost impossible in this business. People come and people go and people get hurt and, but it's almost impossible that for 4 years, this story has stayed, not only relevant, but on top. It's just amazing to me. And huge kudos to, Paul Heyman and Roman and whoever else is behind that segment, because that got me into WWE again. I still fast forward through a lot of it, but I'll listen to the promos and I'll watch the angles, and if it's just a match, I'll probably fast forward through it. But yeah, still mesmerized by it. I don't love it, but I guess when you're a kid and you're only watching 1 hour of championship wrestling from Florida, you love everything. But now that I'm an adult and I know things that I know and I've experienced things I've experienced, there's some things that aren't my cup of tea. I've been very open on social media that as much as I love Brett Law, respect him as a great businessman, I'm not a fan of the blood and gut stuff. Once the light bulb tubes come out, the light bulb fluorescent tubes, you've lost me. I don't even want to watch anymore. But there's people who like that. So God bless them. I'm not saying, everything's so tribal these days. I'm not saying don't watch it. I'm saying it's not for me. So yeah, not everything mesmerizes me anymore. I'm still mesmerized by a good angle or a great match or a good promo.
Hey, there are so many different forms of professional wrestling that it's they cater to one particular audience, where like when WWF, WCW, you had a multitude of genres within the companies, and one of those was obviously for WCW a huge selling point during the Monday Night Wars were the luchadors. Now, I had actually interviewed Vince Russo a few years ago, and
he's gonna love my book.
Yeah, about that. So I actually asked him about the working relationships with WCW and New Japan Pro Wrestling, particularly when Jushin Thunder Liger came in to defend the IWGP Junior Heavyweight Championship against Jushin Thunder Liger. I believe it was, against Juventud Guerrera in, I believe, 1999 on an episode of Nitro. What were your thoughts about that? And the only reason why I ask is because when I asked Vince Russo if he had permission from New Japan Pro Wrestling about him losing a title, their wrestler losing a title, Vince Russo had said, well, he's coming on my show, so if he's bringing the title, that means he can defend it, win it, or lose it. And he booked.
All respect to Vince Russo. He's telling stories that aren't true. And again, I make very clear in the book of what I think about Vince Russo as a writer, but it's nothing personal. It's I wish him well. I hope his grandkids go on to be multi-billionaires and or president of the United States. It's not personal for me. I just don't think he was very good at doing his job. And there's no way that New Japan would have that they would have switched without New Japan signing off. There's just no way that would have happened. I was there and I know. But Vince made it very clear, to the point where a lot of wrestlers made a nice chunk of change in a lawsuit settlement, that he had no interest in lucha libre wrestling or Mexico or Japanese wrestlers. And got him some heat, and like I said, got a lawsuit, and a bunch of guys made a nice chunk of change, and the lawyers, I'm sure, made a huge chunk of change. But I don't know if his opinion changed over time. I wasn't in that circle, so I can't tell you. What I can tell you for sure is there's no way that that belt's changing hands without New Japan signing off on it. Not a chance in hell.
Well, that is good to know. Thank you.
Sure, man.
Speaking of, learning about things in wrestling through this great book that you've done with Guy Evans, Sitting Ringside Volume 1. One of my favorite stories that you tell in here takes you from ring announcer to helping book WCW Saturday nights, 6:05 Eastern time, folks. I, as a kid, loved WCW on Saturday night. And you talk how Jimmy Hart, who you spoke about earlier, came to you about this and setting you up with this. That whole experience,
Go ahead.
Reading in the book was incredible, especially for what you had to say, especially about the ratings for WCW Saturday Night.
That a couple of things on that story. That part of my history of professional wrestling and the XWF, which we're going to take a deep dive in volume. And if you think I had a lot of cool formats and rare memos and stuff from WCW, wait till you see what I have from the XWF that's never been seen before. But that those two periods, my favorite part of being in the 30 years in the wrestling business, because I got to be a part of almost every aspect of it: production, booking, talent. Like Tony Khan, I used to book my own territory when I was a teenager. I had a pad and a pencil, and I'd book week-to-week TVs with angles and storylines. And I usually used wrestlers that I would see on indie shows or read about that I thought, that sounded like they were good, but from other territories. I look back and it's pretty crazy, but I did do that. But I was doing this with real people. And the thing about WCW Saturday Night, when we took over, me and Jimmy and Arn and Tony Schiavone, and Woody Kearse, who was the producer of the show at the time. The young talent really had no interest they had given up interest in Nitro and Thunder. They weren't getting a break. They were still doing their, cruiserweight matches or TV title matches. But they loved coming to WCW Saturday Night. I'm talking about Benoit and Conan and Rey Mysterio and Perry Saturn and the whole crew, Eddie Guerrero, Chris Jericho. So they would love it. And then as you read in the book, our deal was, look, we'll just take those guys, and the top guys don't have to come because they never wanted to come anyway. They'd find a reason to get off if they were booked through the office. So you look back, it's pretty crazy that we didn't have to send, to the best of my knowledge, a format like to Eric to sign off on. He was just like, use those guys, do what you want. And, as long as you're using those guys, we really don't care what you do. And like you said, as they started creeping up, Jimmy kept saying, you watch out. If we ever get close to Thunder, it's going to be over. And Jimmy was one of the smartest guys I ever met in this business. He doesn't really put that on display a lot because he likes to not be the, he just wants to be Jimmy Hart, the character, more than Jimmy Hart, this is my feelings about this. Because if you give feelings about anything, it's going to hurt somebody's feelings. And Jimmy doesn't want any heat, never has. So, but he knew, and he was right. We got to Thunder had 2.7 and we had a 2.6. And the next week, that was a package show that Scott Hudson threw back and forth to other matches that happened during the show, sitting at the desk in the studio. So, and the one thing that Guy brought up that I didn't even realize is my favorite show growing up was, World Championship Wrestling, Georgia Championship Wrestling before that, 6:05 every Saturday. And, I was part of booking the last one of that lineage of shows, which I didn't even realize. I didn't think about it until Guy brought it up. So that's super cool. I mean, how cool is that? Grew up watching the Fabulous Freebirds and the Assassin and Wrestling 2 and Ole Anderson and Dusty Rhodes and Terry Funk, and that whole crew, and to book the last show of that lineage, the last live show, or show with actual matches in it that weren't pre-taped. How super cool is that?
I thought it was awesome. I have to ask, you did a lot with WCW Saturday Night, towards the end there, where even it had its own mainstay with the WCW TV Championship. Was there any particular talents that you enjoyed working with, being part of WCW Saturday Nights?
I enjoyed the whole vibe. Everybody was, it was getting tense on the other shows. It was around the time, that they'd have to stop a show because there'd be a fight or an argument at the go position, and things got really tense. Things weren't going well, and nobody could quite find a way to get back in the right direction. And Saturday, I just remember, I talk in the book about when we first started with Nitro, it was like a team effort. Everybody's on the same team, aiming for one goal, which is to get this effort over to the audience, because we had never been able to do that in WCW. And we had this prime time that we didn't expect. And, everybody was on board that we're going to do, I don't think anybody expected what happened was going to happen, but everybody was on board to make sure we all worked together to make sure we gave it our best try. And that went away towards the end, but it was still there on every other Wednesday when we taped WCW Saturday Night. Everybody's happy to be there. Me and Tony and Jimmy and Woody and Arn worked great together. I even, hired another ring announcer to do the show so I could be at the go position, which is something I had dreamed about. It's still one of the coolest experiences in my life to watch it from that perspective. So, I mean, it was awesome. It was a breath of fresh air. It was an extra day on the road for us every other week, but for me, it was I had a smile on my face when I left Thursday morning, as opposed to not always having a smile on your face when we weren't. It was the week we weren't taping 2 weeks of Saturday Night, and not too much of a smile leaving Thunder on Wednesday morning.
Oh, I have fond memories of WCW Saturday Night, sitting with my grandfather at 6:05. So, David, thank you for helping make those memories with that show, because that was
I'm honored.
My grandfather, he had passed away, and then so that was always something for me that was like a big deal. And then when everything started to slide, for WCW, the realization for me as a fan, but like having those memories were going on the way out for everything that was happening to WCW at the time. Now, during the Vince Russo era, there's one question I gotta ask, and I tend to ask a lot of the wrestlers that were part of WCW this question. Some have no comment, some weren't really part of the storyline that involved these certain people. What were your thoughts when WCW started bringing porn stars in?
Nothing against porn stars, but I didn't think they had any place in wrestling. I mean, I just didn't get it. I still to this day don't get it. Maybe somebody could explain it to me. Russo never could. He has a different vision for what this business should be than I have, and it's very simple. I don't. He thinks what I think is good is great pro wrestling is bad pro wrestling, and I think what he thinks is great pro wrestling or sports entertainment is horrible, horrific, and so. You're never going to meet in the middle. You're never going to get Russo say, you know what, Penzer, in hindsight, you're right. I sucked. I was the worst writer in writer or booker in wrestling history. He's not going to say it. I get it. I understand that. He believes he did good things. I don't. So that, and that's fair. Again, it's nothing personal, man. It's just a difference of opinion. I didn't like the porn stars. I mean, I didn't mind looking at them, but most of them actually weren't even that good looking. Almost like they went out of their way to get like ugly porn stars.
I mean, hey, at the time, I honestly didn't know who they were until like later on when I had seen photos, and then, as an adult saw who they were, and I was just like, why as a kid did I not like, I mean, I was a teenager, but I was like, it was one kind of thought to my head, like, where are my parents? Like, like maybe I shouldn't be watching WCW right now as a, at this age. But um, as I said, with WCW and the Monday Night Wars, I was a channel flipper. I think like a lot of people were. WCW just had those certain things for me that were a mainstay that I had to keep the channel on. And throughout the process, as WCW had changed, we had saw things through the Eric Bischoff era, then the Russo era, and then we even got Bischoff and Russo at one point. And then again, you learn something new every day. You got to sit in and be part of like the booking committee at one point, where Kevin Nash and Disco Inferno and others were also part of that committee. But you played a couple of vital roles in Starrcade 2000 with the ladder match. With
triple team triple ladder match that opened Starrcade, the Young Dragons and the 3 count, and then the guys who had left each of those, Jamie and I forget who else it was, but yeah, I knew they could go out. I knew they could go out there and put on an amazing opening match and set the tone for the night. And I didn't talk a lot, unless I was pretty damn confident that I had a good idea, and they loved it. And the 3 count and Young Dragons loved it, and they went out there and made it happen. So kudos to them. I could book anything, but if they don't go out there and make it happen, then nobody remembers it and nobody gives a shit that I came.
Yeah, and one of the other ones that you mentioned in the book, the phenomenal AJ Styles. You played a part in what was that?
What were the ones?
Oh, I said the other one was that you had mentioned in the book, is part of the booking committee that you played a part in, was the push of AJ Styles in WCW.
AJ Styles, as we know, is phenomenal. To steal a phrase, I saw it from the very beginning. He had something that nobody else had. It was a combination of athletics and athleticism and his this leg strength and his willingness to do these crazy moves. But he had great psychology, and he could wrestle too, and he had a good look. So yeah, I was always big. AJ Styles and Air Paris were going to have a run with the junior tag team championship before the company got at least that was the plan. That was my idea. So yeah, but just to put a period on the end of the sentence about Vince Russo, I think his thought was, if you go by a car crash, everybody looks. You know what I mean? The problem with that, and he's true, everybody looks. So in that, by looking in his mind, they're turning on the TV. They want to see this car crash called Nitro, but nobody ever wants to see another car crash like that. They might look when they see it. They're not going to turn on the TV on Monday nights to see that, because it's unsettling. So I just don't think he ever got that. But that's my opinion again. And I do have to go in just a little bit, so have another interview. So
yeah, no, I have
time for a couple more questions.
Yeah, no, I actually only had 2 more, believe it or not.
Well, there you go.
So it was perfect.
And I know I'm long-winded too, so that doesn't help.
Oh, no, totally. It's totally okay. And my opinion, when it comes to interviews, the more you talk, I think the better they are. So I'm totally
good, 'cause I talk a lot.
So one of my last 2 questions was,
sure.
You bring up Kevin Sullivan in the book a lot, and in this particular part of the book involves him putting the WCW championship on Chris Benoit. How important is it to you to keep personal life, and how important was it to keep WCW business life separated from each other?
Well, I mean, we'll go into this in detail in volume 2. Unfortunately, we have to. But you know, Chris, I knew Chris very well. We lived in a city called Peachtree City, south of the Atlanta airport, and there was a whole crew of William Regal and his wife and family, and there's a guy named Darwin who was the one of the camera operators who him and his wife were still friends to this day with them, and Fit Finley and his wife Mel, Johnny Grunge and his wife, and Chris Benoit and Nancy. And you know, I saw that whole thing go down right in front of my eyes, and you know, I look, it's none of my business, none of my business. Never talked to Chris about it, never talked to Kevin about it. But yeah, fortunately, you know, Chris, you know, Kevin really wanted to prove when he got the opportunity to come back under Bill Bush, he really wanted to prove that he wanted to, because Russo had told all those guys, I'm going to make you stars, like I made the guys in WWE stars, Steve Austin and The Rock and all that. And he wanted to follow that premise. Now, he had a different way of going about it. It was different booking, but he wanted to make that happen for all those guys. And he meant it. He was sincere, and they didn't believe him. And, you know, Chris knew, because we were, you know, we hung out on the weekends when we had a free weekend all together with a group of people. He knew that Kevin was my friend. We never talked about it. You know, that night that it all went down, I begged those guys to stay. They were mad at me, or Kevin wasn't mad at me. I just didn't take sides. I was like, look, man, wait a week. You can leave next week, and you know, but maybe give Kevin a chance to show you that that he's sincere. Well, they just didn't trust him. And what went down that day, in some ways, you know, even made that even more untrustworthy of a relationship. So you know what? Ultimately, they were right. Ultimately, they bet on themselves, and they were right. And so yeah, so I just kept out of the middle of it. I didn't, you know, I was just friends with those guys, and I was friends with Kevin, and Kevin was a big help to me, and he wrote the foreword to my book, and I'm grateful. And if I had more time, I'd tell more Kevin Sullivan sometime. Maybe I could come back sometime.
Absolutely. I'd love to have you back. And I know that, ladies and gentlemen, volume 2 of Sitting Ringside will be out October 2024. You can pre-order that GuyEvansBook.com. You can also order volume 1 there and on Amazon. David, I would love to have you come back again so we can share more stories. And I actually have a lot more questions in regards to
Sure.
WCW, TNA, and things like that. I'd love to have you back. For now, let fans know where they can find your socials and follow you on X and things like that.
I'm primarily on Twitter. I'm never going to call it X. It's a dumb name. But I'm on Twitter at David Penzer. Don't talk politics. Don't, you know, get into public spat for the most part. Talk wrestling, a little you know, music, because I'm a big concert fan. You know, stuff like that. But primarily the wrestling business. And David, I think it's David Penzer WCW on Facebook. Just type in my name, you'll see it. And I'm on Instagram. Not really an Instagram person. I never really understood it. So automatically, if I post something to Facebook, my wife set it up to where it goes to Instagram, but I'm not an Instagram guy. No TikTok. I have no use for it. And that's it. So follow me, and go to Amazon.com. If you go to GuyEvansBook.com or DavidPenzerBook.com, it takes you to the same place. Tons of old, rare formats that nobody's ever seen before, that, you know, and internal memos from WCW that comes, you know, as part of the book. And there's also packages on Guy's website to where you actually could get the actual format. So say for the, you know, you go to a WrestleCon and you have the format for the last night, you could have Sting and Ric Flair, you know, sign that last match, that page where that main event is, and all in the format, and you know, frame that, put that on your office wall. That's to me, that's something pretty cool. I might do that myself. So yeah, thank you so much. I'm so glad you liked it, and look forward for you leaving a rating and a testimonial. And thank you for spreading the word. And I'll definitely be back. I've had a lot of fun.
Awesome. Thank you. And I want to thank Guy Evans for setting this interview up. Fans, remember, spoiler freeze, the way to be. We're out.
I love it.